how is nutrition seen by conventional medicine for the treatment of EDS and fibromyalgia? Because I know you have an interest in fibromyalgia as well. How do they, look at it for us?
So I think they kind of don't. They just don't. It's, it's overlooked for sure. But what we do know is that the gut is very connected to every other system in the body. And if we're eating in a way that, is first of all going to reduce our ability to absorb nutrients, that's going to affect everything from energy production, and that just snowballs to all of our issues. Again, I do really feel that, and again, more research is coming out about this whole like subclinical, insulin resistance, or, the body's inability to use the glucose fully as a source of energy. And that can kind of be a vicious cycle, because then what happens is you're craving energy, and you're going to crave that. People who have those like sugar cravings, it's a vicious cycle, because the glucose will rise, the blood sugar, will decrease the blood sugar, finally when the body makes enough of the insulin to grab it, but then it might grab too much, and then your blood sugar is low, and then your body's going to tell you to eat more carbohydrates because we need more fast. And, what I see in my patients is that, we get rid of that cycle, and it changes everything.
Yes, absolutely. Gosh, can totally relate to that. When you get rid of those cravings and those sugar cravings, everything seems to stabilize.
Yes.
I have mast cell activation as well. And so I've been on a mast cell diet, the low histamine diet. And I know you have a whole section on your website about mast cells and histamine diets. But, changing that and cutting out, well, on top of that, I also have SIBO. Which I've now got under control. So my diet, yes, thankfully. But obviously your diet becomes quite restricted, but not eating sugars helped so much in managing both of those conditions. Really, really interesting. You've got such a wide range. Your website is really interesting. I highly recommend people go and look at it, because you've got so many different areas that you can treat people and help people with. Because tell us about your cookbook that you wrote on the fibromyalgia. But I guess that's for chronic pain conditions, right? I guess it's an anti-inflammatory type.
Yes, it's basically anti-inflammatory, low. Again, I hate to use labels, so it's really just like a lower glycemic index diet, meaning it's not going to spike your blood sugar. And I really, staying away from refined sugars, or even, using high amounts of natural sugars, because those will also raise your blood sugar as well. So really just, keeping things nutrient dense, meaning using vegetables and fruits and, whole grains that are going to give you the vitamins that your body is looking for and needs in order to sustain itself, while staying away. So with fibromyalgia, though, it's a little bit of a different patient population. Some people can have fibromyalgia and have an EDS diagnosis as well, though. But for fibromyalgia, we try to stay away from the nightshades, which people with EDS don't necessarily have to stay away from nightshades. And also something to point out about that, and especially even with mast cells, and even myself having 2 children with mastocytosis. So the low histamine diet, or any elimination diet, is really a jumping off point. It does not necessarily mean that you won't be able to have every single food on that list. What it does mean is that these are foods that might cause an issue for most people.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean that you eliminate all of them and never add them back.
Yes.
You can eliminate the foods on that list that bother you. And then if there's a food you're not sure about, as long as there's no anaphylaxis going on, that's a food that, again, if you want to work with a dietitian or work with a physician, you can work to, try those foods. But what's really important is to try a new food without using anything else new within the 3-day period, so you can actually check and see if that food is bothering you or is not.
Okay.
And again, even like, especially for people with mast cell issues, I can tell you, like my son, he can't have tomatoes too often. He can
Yeah.
have them sometimes, but if
Yes.
he goes overboard, he knows it, he suffers. And
Yeah.
that's when he's like, oh, mom, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have eaten that. And people think it's like a black and white situation. It's not black and white.
Yeah.
It's what's your level in terms of like how close are you to having a reaction today.
Yes.
If you're doing really well, maybe you can have a slice of pizza and the tomatoes aren't going to bother you.
Yeah.
But if the weather's off and you just having low energy and you can kind of feel it, and then you have the tomatoes, that's going to put you over the edge. The cup will run over, the mast cells will release, and it will be problematic for you.
Yeah.
So I find that there's like, a lot of patients think it's like a black and white. It's so much of an area of gray. It's not like a real food allergy, an IgE food allergy, which is that will cause a reaction every single time. This is more nuanced. It's not as easy to like, a lot of people will say, oh, but I saw you eat that and you're fine with it. And it's like, well, I was fine with it that day.
Yeah.
And no one really like that makes you look like, you're lying sometimes.
Yeah, it's the usual thing, isn't it, for us? It's the same thing when people say, well, you look well, you look healthy.
Yes.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But you're so right. I remember my consultant who diagnosed my mast cells saying to me, you can eat, once you've got things under control, you can eat tomato occasionally. But if you go on a tomato fest, he called it, if you go on a tomato fest and you eat tomatoes every single day, you're probably going to know about it. And, I don't recommend you doing that, but you can have the odd tomato. And I do now, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But if I went and had tomato soup every single day for a week, I probably wouldn't feel very nice.
Right.
But yeah, again, I think it comes back to this finding your baseline, doesn't it? What's that baseline? And can I slowly introduce those foods again? I think that's a really important point, because I for sure certainly thought, oh my God, this is my diet for the rest of my life. But it's not true. It's really not true. So yeah, thank you for.
And also, like, I do also like to point out that, well, first of all, again, I have 2 kids with this, right? So even in my 2 kids who literally share, genetic material, they have different intolerances. So like my daughter can't eat raw spinach. My son can. She can eat tomatoes. He can't. So it's so individual. And you really can't go by anyone else. You can use it as a jumping off place, but it doesn't mean that you can't have all those foods. And I it upsets me when I see people who are so restricted, because you don't necessarily have to be that restrictive and not eat everything on that list. But also, you're right, once you're at a more stable place, once you do all the modalities and get yourself to a more stable place, and sometimes that's going to include medication, and that is okay. It's okay if you use medication. And that's another like hump I feel like people need to get over. There's no shame in it. But once you get there, sometimes you can eat things, and you also have to kind of decide for yourself, is it worth it to eat that? That's why I always, tell people, okay, so it's your birthday and your kids are making you a birthday cake. You want to have a piece of that cake. Are you going to pay for it later? You might pay for it, but it's only one meal. And again, as long as it's not a life-threatening reaction, that's okay. It's okay to indulge a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My son made me a cake, actually. You just reminded me of, and he put blue food coloring in it, which is like, but he'd made it for me. So there's no way I wasn't going to eat it. So I did have it, I ate it, and, I got a migraine. But you think, oh, like you say, it's manageable. I wasn't going to, upset him and say no. But yeah, you can get away with little things, I think.